Imagine finding an anonymous letter predicting a disaster. It describes the catastrophe in vivid detail, but gets key facts wrong. Right? What would that tell you? The author wrote before the event, not after. This is exactly how scholars date one of the most important documents in Christianity. Mark chapter 13 contains Jesus predicting the temple's destruction. The prediction is eerily accurate and strangely incomplete. That gap between accurate and incomplete is our window into when Mark was written. Mark 13 is called the Olivet Discourse. Jesus sits on the Mount of Olives, looks at the temple, and delivers his longest speech in the entire gospel. The topic, eschatology, the study of end times, from the Greek word eschaton. Mark's gospel moves fast, using the word immediately over 40 times. The author believes time is short. Here's the sequence Jesus lays out. First, false prophets and wars appear, but these are not yet the end. Second, persecution intensifies. Believers are handed to councils, beaten in synagogues, betrayed by their own families. Third, the abomination of desolation appears. We'll unpack this crucial phrase in a moment. Fourth, cosmic collapse. The sun darkens, stars fall from the sky, the heavens shake. Fifth and finally, the Son of Man arrives on clouds, and angels gather the elect from the four winds. The kicker comes in verse 30. Jesus says all of this happens within this generation, roughly 40 years from when he's speaking. Now the crucial phrase, abomination of desolation. Mark 13:14 reads, "When you see the desolating sacrilege set up where it ought not to be, let the reader understand." That parenthetical, "let the reader understand," is the author breaking the fourth wall, speaking directly to his audience. He's signaling, pay attention. You'll recognize this. The phrase comes from the book of Daniel, chapters 9, 11, and 12. There it referred to Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a Greek king who desecrated the Jerusalem temple around 167 BCE, possibly by sacrificing a pig on the altar. Jesus is invoking a pattern. What Antiochus did before, someone will do again. Daniel's prophecy established a template, desecration of the temple, followed by intense suffering, followed by divine deliverance. This is typology, past events prefiguring future ones. Mark's readers would recognize the pattern. They knew the Daniel story. They understood that when Jesus says abomination of desolation, he's predicting another temple crisis. The question for historians, did Mark's community witness this crisis, or were they still waiting for it? Here's the dating method. Scholars look for where an author's knowledge of events becomes fuzzy or wrong. Mark predicts the temple's destruction with confidence. Not one stone will be left upon another. But he includes no details about how it actually happened. Nothing about Roman armies besieging Jerusalem for 2 years. Nothing about the military campaign led by Generals Vespasian and Titus. Nothing about the specific events of 70 CE when the temple finally fell. Mark knows something catastrophic is coming or has just begun. He doesn't know how it ends. This places the Gospel's composition right around 70 CE, during or just before the temple's destruction. Compare Mark with Luke's Gospel, written later. Luke copies much of Mark 13, but makes revealing edits. Where Mark says abomination of desolation, Luke writes Jerusalem surrounded by armies. Where Mark remains vague about destruction details, Luke specifies, they will fall by the sword and be led captive among all nations. Where Mark has the Son of Man returning immediately after the temple crisis, Luke inserts a gap. Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Luke knows the destruction happened and Jesus didn't immediately return. Mark doesn't know that yet. The historical context makes this concrete. In 66 CE, Jewish rebels in Judea rose against Rome. The Roman response was devastating. Between 66 and 68 CE, Roman legions swept through Galilee, crushing resistance. Then they turned south toward Jerusalem. The siege lasted from 68 to 70 CE, ending with the temple's destruction. Scholars reconstruct that Mark was likely written in or near Galilee to a community watching Roman armies advance. They had seen what happened to Galilee. They feared what was coming to Jerusalem. The Gospel's urgency makes visceral sense in this context. Mark's original ending reinforces this reading. Chapter 16, verse 8. The women discover the empty tomb, encounter an angel, and flee. They tell no one, for they were afraid. That's it. The Gospel ends mid-sentence in Greek. No resurrection appearances, no Great Commission, just fear and silence. But the angel's message matters. Tell the disciples and Peter to meet Jesus in Galilee. Some scholars read this as Mark speaking to his own community. Wait in Galilee. Endure the suffering. Jesus will return. Mark's gospel presents a clear pattern. Suffering precedes glory. Jesus suffers on the cross, then rises. Believers suffer persecution, then the Son of Man returns to vindicate them. This isn't abstract theology, it's pastoral encouragement to a community in crisis. Mark 13:13 states it directly. The one who endures to the end will be saved. For readers watching Roman legions destroy their homeland, this message offered hope. The pattern Jesus established, suffering followed by divine vindication, would hold true for them as well. Three common misconceptions need addressing. First, some argue generation means race, making the prophecy timeless. The Greek word genia most naturally means a 40-year generation, not an ethnic group. Second, some suggest Mark was written much later and merely pretends ignorance. But if writing decades after 70 CE, why omit the dramatic siege details Luke includes? The absence of information is the evidence. Third, some read the Olivet Discourse as purely future prophecy. But let the reader understand, and this generation show Mark believed these events were imminent for his audience. This dating method applies beyond Mark. The book of Daniel uses the same technique, accurate predictions up to Antiochus IV, then vague or wrong predictions afterward, placing its composition around 165 BCE. Revelation shows similar patterns. The question is always, where does the author's predictive accuracy break down? That breakdown reveals when the text was written. Mark 13 isn't just ancient prophecy. It's a window into a community watching their world collapse, clinging to the belief that suffering would give way to glory, that the Son of Man would arrive on clouds to set things right. Mark's community waited in Galilee for Jesus to return on the clouds. They're still waiting. But the gospel they left behind tells us exactly what they believed, when they believed it, and why. A community facing Roman violence found hope in a pattern. Jesus suffered, then triumphed. They would too. That message, endure, the end is near, suffering precedes glory, echoes across 2,000 years to every community facing persecution,